and thank you for joining us for Florida Shines Virtual College Week. My name is Nashla Daware, and I will be facilitating today's session to learn how to navigate the admissions process to get you into the school of your choice. Now, before we begin, I want to go over a few items with you. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will address them during the Q&A session with our speaker. Closed captioning is provided for this session, so you can click the link in the chat box. This session will be recorded. The recording, along with any materials shared today, will be posted on our website at floridashines.org. And finally, we are live on Twitter, so feel free to share your comments and connect with us at FL Shines. For those of you that are not familiar, Florida Shines empowers Floridians to earn a college degree and find a bright career by providing free online tools to help students, parents, and educators. We work with all of Florida's colleges and universities and other partners to help students succeed in school and beyond. From floridashines.org, as a middle or high school student, you can explore Florida's colleges and universities, check your progress towards high school graduation, view your Bright Futures scholarship eligibility, learn ways to pay for college, and a lot more. So I invite you to visit floridashines.org to learn more about these resources. Now I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Ethan Henley. Ethan currently serves as the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of West Florida, where he oversees recruitment, orientation, and visit experience. Ethan earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Alabama and his master's degree in higher education administration at Auburn University. Beginning his career as a freshman admissions counselor, Ethan has worked with countless prospective college students as they navigate the college admissions process and move through their journey to college enrollment. He is very excited to share some of the key secrets to college admissions and the process today. So Ethan, thank you for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nashla. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon just to talk about the college application process, from the preparations to begin thinking about as a junior or younger in high school, and as you navigate into that process as a high school senior. As we kind of go through the presentation this afternoon, we're going to kind of talk about just some of those secrets, as I've called them, to college admission. We're going to talk about students preparing academically, some tips and tricks on doing research for the colleges or universities you're looking to potentially apply to and ultimately attend, the importance of applying early, as well as understanding the different requirements and criteria that each institution will be utilizing in their application review when you get to that point. To dive in, and I'm not sure, I believe I'm having trouble taking over the controls there.
You should have them if you click just a couple times, Ethan. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Working through the technology. It's a blessing and a curse most days. Just kind of quickly diving in again, we're going to kind of start first with some preparations before you apply. This is definitely going to be most beneficial to the juniors in the room there as you think about this process in about less than a year's time for you. First, of course, preparing academically. It goes without saying you want to have the strongest academic background possible as you enter the college application process. And that, predominantly means keeping a strong GPA through high school. When you go to submit those applications, your high school GPA from your 9th grade to your 11th grade year, it's likely going to be the GPA that's going to be utilized in your admissions decision by the time you're applying that first semester of your senior year. So it's certainly important to keep that GPA as strong as possible. If you're seeing some deficiencies now, putting in that extra effort so you can ensure that GPA is going to be the strongest possible by the time you're ready to submit those applications. In addition to that, taking the ACT or SAT, most colleges or universities are going to be looking at these scores for an admissions decision as well, in addition to your GPA and potentially other elements. I certainly recommend taking these tests early, at least No later than your junior year, the first semester of your junior year, if possible, if not even earlier, just to get kind of acclimated with the exams and the format so you can get more comfortable with those exams. And if you are able to take them multiple times, that certainly can be to your benefit. Most institutions will likely superscore, which means they may be taking the highest scores across all your different tests and test states as they consider your application potentially. So taking it multiple times is certainly going to be to your benefit. And even taking both tests if you are able. Students kind of test differently and the formats are a little bit different. So if you find you're struggling with the ACT, the SAT format might be a little bit more conducive for you. I haven't seen a clear pattern with that. It really depends on the student. So definitely taking those exams, taking them early to ensure that you're getting the strongest scores possible there. With preparing academically, dual enrollment is exceptionally popular in Florida, and it certainly can be a huge benefit to you as you kind of enroll in college and kind of getting some of that college coursework out of the way early as part of your high school curriculum, and that is certainly very commendable. But keeping in mind that your dual enrollment courses may not be overcoming any low ACT or SAT test scores. I've seen that be kind of an assumption with some students I've worked with, that their dual enrollment will overcome a potentially low ACT or SAT score or GPA. It certainly is going to be considered, but it may not necessarily completely overlook that. So just kind of keeping that in mind, that you need to be sure you're doing well on both avenues of the testing as well as your dual enrollment coursework. With that note, being cognizant that the dual enrollment courses you are taking, you are already cultivating a college GPA at that point. So being sure that you are putting in that extra effort for those dual enrollment courses, because that GPA will actually carry with you as you enroll in college as well. So just kind of being mindful of that. Also, very close in connection with your academics as well, considering your extracurricular activities as well. What things are you doing outside of the classroom that can supplement your academic background? Student leadership opportunities, student organizations, civic engagement, various things like that can certainly strengthen an application. Some institutions may be even looking at what you're doing to that level as well. So definitely keeping in mind being well-rounded academically in and out of the classroom. The second thing to really note is creating a college-specific email. Email is going to be one of the primary forms of communication you're going to have as you go through the college application and search process. It's important to go ahead and get in the habit of having an email account, checking and reading your emails that you are getting, especially as you're going through the college search process. This is where we're going to be communicating with you about important information, application information, dates, deadlines, special offers, maybe coming to you via email event invitations. So it's important that you are checking that and reading that email account and getting in the habit of doing that on a regular basis. Another note, although email addresses like PartyTime24 seem very fun and entertaining, it might not be the best email account to use as you go through your college search process, because admission counselors and staff like myself are going to be seeing that. And you certainly want to represent yourself in the most professional and positive light as you're going through the application process. And I've seen some very, very fun email accounts in my day. So just kind of keeping that in the back of your mind. Also with email, be sure that you are creating and using your email. That is certainly one of my strongest recommendations. And refraining from using a parent or family-based email account, because you want to ensure that that communication is kind of coming directly to you and you're managing that. But on the same token, many times test scores and various documents could potentially have a matching element that includes your an email address. And if your test score record has your email address and you've applied with a parent email address, there might be some disconnect there. So it's important to keep your family, of course, aware in the loop, but it might be better for you to use your email account as opposed to that, just for those matching purposes alone, is a huge recommendation. All right, so as you kind of go through the process, you begin considering what colleges or universities that you would like to apply to or consider applying to. A lot of things to consider when you're doing your research. First and foremost, kind of getting a broad idea of what schools you're interested in. Maybe start just with a broader list. Start looking at some websites, check out some virtual tours for institutions that you're interested in or may be interested in. These will definitely give you a kind of a good, a quick feel of what the institution offers, what their campuses are like. I have seen some very robust virtual tours that make you feel like you're right there on campus. So that's a great way just to kind of get that look and feel of the institution you're looking at. Of course, also considering, what specific academic programs are you looking after? Do you already have a very strong idea of what your major is going to be? And if so, what programs or what institutions are offering that specific program that you're looking into? If you're undecided, look at the programs that are offered, see what may or may not interest you to get an idea of what's there for you. You certainly want to make sure that if you're heavily considering a college university that it is offering an academic program, since that is the primary reason of attending college is to go and get that higher education, of course. Other things to consider as you're doing some considerations, are there any specific social organization opportunities, specific academic programs or supplemental programs, research opportunities, study abroad opportunities that you're really interested in considering and seeing what schools offer that as well. A variety of things is really going to be kind of, as you begin that research, you're kind of filling out what's going to be the best fit and what is really going to meet your needs. Things to also consider: are you looking for a large institution or a smaller institution? Certainly, that if you're coming from a small community or a smaller high school, transitioning to a large institution could be a little overwhelming, but it's certainly doable. I did that myself and really enjoyed that experience. But that's something to consider: what your preferences are on a larger versus smaller. Many times that can also translate into the size of some classes. Are you comfortable with classes that might be larger lecture style, especially the first couple of years, or do you prefer some of those smaller class size options where it has more connection with your peers and your faculty? Definitely things to certainly consider on that regard in terms of size. Also, looking at the freshman class profile, that's going to give you a general idea of the academic rigor of an incoming freshman class, and see kind of where you align with that particular institution's freshman class profile, and giving you an idea of how strong your application may be. Kind of lastly, thing to consider, one of probably the most important things you're likely looking at, especially the families in the room as well, is going to be cost. I definitely want to encourage you not to look at just the sticker price that you're going to be seeing on websites of these institutions you're going to be considering, because although that is the price that it costs, it is very likely that you are not going to be paying that directly out of pocket. Once you consider financial aid, scholarships, various other forms of financial assistance, your out-the-door price, or what you're actually paying out of pocket, will likely be significantly less than that sticker price. So definitely don't let that be overwhelming or discouraging to you. But that is just something to consider as well. But know that at the end of the day, that's likely not what you're going to be paying out of pocket. So it's something to certainly consider. A good reference point potentially as you make your considerations, maybe putting together a spreadsheet, starting broadly and then kind of whittling that down based off kind of what your specific needs and interests are, could certainly be helpful. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about the best fit. You want to pick an institution that is right for you, both academically, the campus, the social elements of the campus as well. So it's certainly you want to be a best fit, because that will be your home ultimately for the next 4 years. So you want to make sure that you feel the most comforted and at home there ultimately when you're making some of those decisions. With that, if you are able to visit campuses, especially as you whittle down that list to 3 or 5 of your top choices, attempting to actually physically visit their campus, going to an open house, going to a campus, that is going to be the best way to really get the idea of what the campus is like, and if you could see yourself there as a student in the future. So definitely encouraging those visits. Some additional resources that you can utilize as you go through your search process. Any institution you're going to be looking at is going to have some level of social media presence. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, to get an idea of what's happening on campus, some cool accolades through social media. You'll see what institutions are doing throughout the year, so that's a great way to get a feel of what the campus is like. Many times institutions may also have other elements outside of the traditional social media platforms. For example, Zeme is an up-and-coming platform that UWF has had a partnership with for several years now, and it is a great resource for student recruitment. Ultimately, what the platform is, you can create an account, and you can follow different institutions' communities, and that the communities will be populated by current students. So you're kind of getting that unfiltered real-world experience of what the campus is like. So that's a cool opportunity, and a lot of institutions are kind of jumping on board with that Zeme platform. So utilizing those to the best of your ability just to see what the campus is like. In addition to that, some institutions may have text messaging for prospective students that kind of for updates and things of that nature. So definitely checking those items out, or at least getting on an email list for that institution. But definitely kind of keeping that in mind as a resource for you. On a related note, obviously being cognizant of what you're putting on your social media accounts. I know social media is just kind of a part of our everyday life now. But of course, being mindful that you are representing yourself as authentically and positively on social media as possible, of course. Some institutions may be looking at those profiles as they make some of their admissions decisions. So again, just being aware of kind of what you're posting out there online and representing yourself to the best of your ability. All right, so we'll kind of now transition a little bit more specifically into that college application process. So this will definitely be more focused at any seniors in the room that are already through in this process or in the process of submitting applications. But juniors, this is not far off. Applications generally open in July or August of the preceding year for the fall you're looking to enroll. For example, fall applications for 2020, most institutions that I'm familiar with are opening in July or August of 2019, so more than a full year before that entry term even starts. So there's a very long application window with that, but very close in line with those applications opening super early. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice, is submitting their applications early. Submitting your application early is really going to provide a variety of benefits for you in terms of scholarship opportunities. Many times, if you're submitting your applications early, you're going to be considered for potential scholarships from institutions, automatic consideration scholarships for freshmen that are going to have very early scholarship priority windows. With that, that allows you time as well to work through the application process, to complete the application and work through completing that application. Simply completing it or submitting an online application may not constitute a completed application. After that, they're going to be asking for required documentation, which we'll talk about more in just a moment about the various required documentation. But all of those pieces will go into completing your application as well. So submitting it early allows you plenty of time to ensure that you're getting that information to the institution and completing that application. As you are submitting those applications for what the institutions you're interested in, go ahead and note what dates and deadlines are specific for those institutions, and noting the difference between their application review process. Are they offering rolling admission, meaning as soon as they complete an application and review, they're offering an admissions decision on a rolling basis, usually a daily basis or a frequent basis? Or is the application process and decision a set date? So if you submit your application, you want to expect to receive an admissions decision until a certain date. That is information that's going to be on the application or on an institution's website, so that's kind of good to know as you go through that process and noting those potential differences. Other opportunities that will be provided for you by submitting and completing your applications early could be early access to housing contracts or getting priority placement in housing. You likely could potentially have early access or priority with orientation registration, or potentially priority with financial aid review in terms of submitting your pre-application for federal student aid and having a financial aid award package provided early. These are all benefits for you. Having access to that early is going to give you ample opportunity to kind of make your decisions, as well as have all that information up front as you make your final selection for what institution that you plan on attending. Also, applying early and getting in early can also potentially get you priority access to reserving your seat in the class by submitting your admissions, your enrollment deposit, or confirming your offer of admission. But all that to say, ultimately applying early, you're wanting to give yourself plenty of time to work through that process, especially if you're submitting multiple applications, kind of keeping track of all those different requirements and kind of working through that process for applying early. Closely associated with that, be sure you're finding out what is required for each institution's application. Every school is going to be different in what exactly that they are requiring of you to complete your application for their application review. Are they requiring ACT or SAT test scores, high school transcripts? Traditionally, that is the most common required components of an application for admission. But is there a separate essay required? Is there a specific essay prompt or guidelines that the institution is providing you that they're looking for in that particular essay? Are they looking for recommendation letters, a resume, writing samples, various things like that could be potential required documents for you. So being sure that you're doing your research and seeing exactly what is required. Typically, as you submit that application, an institution is going to make that very clear of what other documents that they are requiring of you. So being sure that you're kind of creating those lists and making sure that you're keeping that organized together. On that, with submitting those applications and documents, you will notice as you go through that process that many institutions, there might be multiple avenues to submit an application. Most commonly, you will see an institution have their institutional app, which is unique to their website or to their admissions office. But we're seeing an increase in the amount of institutions that are using other forms of application submission platforms, such as the Common Application, the Coalition Application. So those are other opportunities for you. Typically, you want to just pick one of those options and submit one application. But whatever one you pick, just kind of realizing what platform you're using. All of that is really out there to your benefit. For example, for the Common Application, we've certainly expanded those, especially in the state of Florida, of institutions that are using the Common Application or on the Common App. That allows you to submit one application and then select the various institutions you want to apply to, and then that information is sent directly to the institutions you've selected. So it could be also very beneficial, but keeping in mind that if you're submitting things through the Common App or Coalition or other third party, that the review and receipt time might be a little bit longer than a potential institutional app, just because of going through a couple of additional channels to get that application information to the institution. You'll also notice, especially in Florida, we've increased the utilization of the self-reported academic record. That will be very apparent when you're submitting the application if that is the process that institution is utilizing. And ultimately, it's what the name implies. You are providing your academic record yourself in an application process that includes your high school transcript and course information, as well as your ACT or SAT test scores. You're providing it on the self-reported side, and if you're offered admission, they will go back and ask for the official versions of that transcript and your test scores after the fact. So that's just kind of an important distinction as well. That varies, especially in Florida, of who's using the SAR versus requiring official documents, but that is a certainly important distinction to make. If an institution is requiring your official documentation for your application review, being sure you're noting that, and then making those appropriate requests from your high school to give your official transcript over to the institution, as well as having your test score sent directly from the testing agency. So a lot of nuances there with the application process, but just making sure you're making note of those different nuances as you're submitting those applications. Of course, if you have questions as you go through that process for any institution, always feel free to reach out to the admissions counselor or the admissions office to ask any clarifying questions. We're here to help in that regard, so please reach out with that. Also keeping in mind as you're submitting documentation, realizing that it's not an immediate process. Even if it is electronic delivery of a transcript or test scores, although electronic delivery is typically the fastest and easiest way to receive information, it doesn't mean it's automatic. Typically, even with electronic delivery, there's going to be a processing timeline or delay of getting the information directly to your application record. So being sure you're giving yourself enough time for that and realizing it's not going to pop up immediately once you hit send on some of those additional documentations as well. Especially if you are, for your transcripts, for a great example, if those are being mailed by the U.S. Postal Service by your high school, that will be certainly an extended amount of time to get that, typically 2 to 3 weeks for that to arrive via the U.S. mail, be physically reviewed by a staff member, and then attached to your application file. So keeping in mind all of those timelines for sure. All right, so as you're completing those applications, it's important to do your research on what the criteria is going to be utilized for that application review at each institution. Most institutions are going to be a little bit different in how they're reviewing applications or what exactly they're looking for. It can go into the level of selectivity of an institution. If they're highly selective, you're likely going to be seeing requests for additional information such as essays, writing samples, recommendation letters. And so getting an idea of kind of what they're looking for could be helpful. In that regard, some institutions may only be looking at your GPA and your test scores. In that case, getting an idea of what that freshman class profile is, where you're stacking up in comparison to the average freshman that was admitted the previous year, gives you a general idea of kind of what that criteria is. If you're going through that process and you're evaluating that criteria, if they're requiring an essay, again, getting an idea of what are they looking for in the essay, what exactly are they wanting to hear from you about? Are they giving you a prompt or those guidelines to kind of guide that potential writing sample? So being cognizant of that. If an institution is requiring letter of recommendation, it's important to be very strategic of who you're selecting to write those letters of recommendation for you. Typically, you are not picking a family member or a friend to write those letters of recommendation. You want someone that can speak to you as a student, you as a person, that can aid in that application review process. It could be a teacher, a coach, a school counselor, a community leader that you've worked with. So being strategic and being mindful of who you're asking to submit those letters of recommendation if that is a requirement. Also noting if course rigor is a huge component of the application review process. That can kind of go back to where we were talking about dual enrollment and what types of dual enrollment you're taking, what types of AP or IB courses you're taking and how well you're doing in those. Is that going to be a factor in that admissions consideration of the level of rigor that you are undergoing as a high school student in that course curriculum? So keeping that in mind. Also, is it a holistic review? Are they looking at all of these elements in combination, or only certain things required and other things supplemental? Kind of getting an idea of what that review is kind of going to be looking like. Typically, an admissions office is going to give you a general idea of what they're looking for as they go through their application review process. It is worth noting, of course, if throughout your high school time that you've had a rough semester or just something that you had extenuating circumstances happen and you just had one semester's GPA wasn't as strong as you would like it, should you explain a bad semester or explain a particular situation with the course? Those are things you can work with your admissions counselor on to see if that's something that you might need to do. Many times that could be helpful in a review process if you're explaining an extenuating circumstance in that particular area for your review. That could be helpful, but it's important to kind of reach out to see if that's something you may need to do. With that, again, working with an admissions counselor is always a strong recommendation. They're going to be one of your greatest resources as you're going through the application, submission, and review process. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to your admissions counselor to ask those types of questions if you're unsure. Again, that's why we're here, to help you along through that process. So never be afraid to make those requests. Again, I just mentioned more of that of working with your admissions counselor. They're going to be able to clarify anything that you might be confused about or unsure about, including dates and deadlines of what they're looking for in the applicant. And it's just a great connection point that also allows you to have a connection with the institution, a more familiar face or a name that you can associate with that particular school, and gives you an idea of the level of commitment and how they work with students as well at that level. So definitely reaching out and building those connections and relationships with your admissions counselors. Also submitting the FAFSA. That is very, very much encouraged. It is free application for federal student aid. This is what is going to determine your eligibility for various forms of financial assistance at the federal and state and sometimes institutional level. This application is always free. So if you're at a website and it's asking you to make a payment for the FAFSA, back out and you're not in the right place. So it will always be a free application at FAFSA.gov. And it is something very highly encouraged. Not all institutions require it, but I highly, highly recommend that at any institution you're going to, because you certainly want a general idea of what financial assistance is out there for you. Even if you feel that your financial situation may not constitute much in the way of financial aid, it is always encouraged to submit that FAFSA just to see what is out there. At absolute minimum, that is going to be required in order for student loans to be a potential opportunity. But in submitting the application is going to give you at least the option and know what's out there for you as you make your final decisions in terms of finances as well. So in addition to scholarships and submitting the FAFSA, that's going to give you a very broad financial aid award package that you can use in your decision. And then that's going to, again, reduce that sticker price we talked about earlier. And then you'll know what your out the door price that you're ultimately going to be paying out of pocket potentially in that case. You may find institutions where you won't have anything to pay out of pocket depending on your scholarship package or financial aid award package. So it's important to have that information on the front end so you can have that in your decision-making process. Of course, you have a lot of resources around you at the high school level. Your high school school counselors, your teachers have been through this every year and worked with students, so they are an invaluable resource for you. So being sure that you're reaching out to them if you have any questions or need some additional guidance on that application process. They'll also be the ones you're reaching out to request those transcripts to be sent to the institutions you're applying to. So again, never be afraid to kind of reach out, build those connections, and use those resources that are around you generally every day. It's also important to keep your parents and family in the loop as well. We see parents and family are very important in the college search and decision-making process. So it's important to kind of keep them informed about what schools you're looking at or the application process. They can also be a great allied resource as you work through some of those requirements, kind of helping you understand the ins and outs of the application as you're working through it. They can also give you a best insight and encouragement and advice on what institution may be the best fit, both for you personally as well as financially as a family. Those are things to consider, and it's important to kind of keep them up to date and in that process, so you're making an informed decision collectively with that. And lastly, creating a next step list. As you work through this application process, you've narrowed down your selections and you're ultimately at the point of making a decision of what institution you're going to be attending. Of course, making sure that you are confirming that offer of admission or submitting your enrollment deposit so you are securing your space in that freshman class. And being cognizant of those deadlines. Generally speaking, May 1st is kind of the national confirmation or intent to enroll deadline for going to college. But being sure that you're looking at each institution individually to see if they have an earlier timeline potentially or a different timeline for you to secure your spot in that freshman class. So making sure you're noting that. But when you do make that selection, prepare your next steps list. Simply submitting that enrollment deposit and confirming that offer of admission doesn't stop the process there. At that point, you open the door to other items that you need to be completing as you move towards enrollment. Things like registering for new student orientation, submitting final documents, your high school transcripts, your college transcripts if you completed dual enrollment. With that, I know with college transcripts, if you are doing dual enrollment, although those courses might be denoted on your high school transcripts because they are counting in your high school curriculum, a college university is going to require that college transcript of which the college credit is originating from as well in order for those courses to be applied to your degree audit, and ultimately you're getting credit for those courses at the college level. So that's an important thing to note as well. Of course, things like immunization paperwork, housing as well. So just the various different elements as you go through before you enroll on the Next Step side. Many institutions will be providing this either as a list on their website, a mailer to you, or this may be even an online resource. Most institutions you're going to find will have some version of an online student portal, which is kind of your one-stop for pretty much anything you're going to be using as a student at that institution. That'll be where you pay your student bill. You'll access like your supplemental learning courses for online courses, your online components for your in-person classes. It's also likely where you might see a Next Steps checklist. At UWF, for example, we have built that into our student portal, and we have a comprehensive Next Step checklist that is digital and dynamic. So as students complete those next steps, such as orientation registration or submitting the FAFSA or submitting a housing contract, each of those items will check off as completed. So that's something to look for if that is a resource for you at the institution you're selecting. But regardless, those next steps are going to be denoted for you. They're going to be very apparent. And it's important that you begin working through those early as well to ensure you're completing all those next steps as you move towards enrollment. And lastly, it's some more final helpful tips as you go through this process. Always remember that this is your journey and this is your time. You're in the driver's seat as you go through this college search and selection process. So be sure that you are taking ownership in that and doing your research and finding an institution that's the best fit for you. But at the same time, certainly don't let that overwhelm you or be scary to you. Don't be afraid to seek guidance. Seek guidance from your family, from your school counselors, from your admissions counselors. You have so much in the way of support that can guide you through that process, but it is certainly yours to take ownership of. I'd also encourage you to keep your options open. Explore several schools to kind of compile your list. Throw in some schools that you might not think would originally be in your considerations, just to give that exploration. Try to visit campuses to get those best fit. You may find an institution that actually turns out to be one of a best fit for you. Might not be one that you've considered in the past. So definitely keeping that in mind, keeping those options open, crafting your list to give you some level of options for you. So definitely keeping that in the back of your mind as well. As I mentioned earlier, don't let the process overwhelm you. I know we've talked about a lot of different nuances and very specific things at various different institutions. But don't let that overwhelm you. Again, start early, do your homework, put together your notes and resources as you narrow down that list, narrow down what requirements are going to be asked of you on that application side, and begin working through that. Again, if you start early, going back to submitting an application early, if you start this process earlier and get in the mindset of putting together your notes early, that is just going to be to your benefit as you begin submitting those applications. So again, but don't let it overwhelm you. Again, you have so many resources and support out there to kind of walk you through that process as well. But it's important to kind of do your homework and your research on the front end. Again, keeping your parents or your family members in the conversation, as they can be some of your greatest support and likely will be in that decision-making process as well. So making sure that they're aware and in those conversations and guiding you through those processes as well. And lastly, enjoy your time in high school. I know that time flies and you're looking forward to college likely, but certainly don't forget to stop and enjoy the time you're in right now and you're finishing up your high school years. They will pass quickly, so being sure you're enjoying them while you're still in that moment. And of course, celebrating your achievements, taking those opportunities to celebrate the milestones you're at currently, whether it's having a great semester and a really strong GPA, getting a student leadership award, or being a leader in a student organization, or giving back to your community, whatever the case may be. Take that opportunity to commend yourself and realize that you are doing great things in the here and now, and that's just going to help you move forward as you transition to college and you enter that experience in that milestone of your life. So always recognize that. It's important to do that for sure. And that really kind of wraps up my tips and tricks and secrets in a nutshell. With that, I think we will have some opportunity for questions, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Ethan, thank you so much for sharing such a wealth of resources. It's always so helpful to have those insider tips. Like you said, at this time, I'd like to invite our audience to send in their questions. We have gotten a few already, and if you don't mind, we'll jump right into Q&A.
Okay.
Ethan, the first couple questions are related to dual enrollment. And so a student is wondering if they can opt to not send their dual enrollment grades, classes, or credits to the college when they apply.
Sure. Usually that is going to be a no. That information is going to need to be sent to the college for review. For dual enrollment specifically, those dual enrollment courses are likely going to be showcased on the high school transcript as it is, because it is counting both for high school credit and college credit. Again, those dual enrollment courses are going to carry with you to your college record. And so you certainly need to be disclosing that as you're going through the application process.
Good to know. Certainly, I'll invite our audience to also check out our session from yesterday. The recording will be available on floridashines.org. There was a session on dual enrollment, so you'll want to check that out. And the main message from that was, Ethan, what you just said. If you are officially a college student, if you begin dual enrollment, so it's not an option to report that information once you commit to that. There's another question related to dual enrollment. The student is in 11th grade, and they wanted to sign up for dual enrollment classes. At the time, they were too late. Is it too late now?
Not necessarily. I think dual enrollment is really going to be up to the student and what they're wanting to do. Dual enrollment is not necessarily going to be a make or break in every instance on your application. It is likely just going to be supplemental. If students want to do dual enrollment next semester or in their senior year, that's certainly commendable, and that is really just going to be up to the student and what's best for them.
Absolutely, yeah, and always important, like you said, to check with your high school. Ethan, related to bringing in credits with transcripts, essentially, if a student has AP subjects like calculus, physics AP, are those part of college transcripts? Can they become college credit for that student?
Absolutely. So AP or IB college credit is not necessarily going to be on a college transcript, since those are, you're taking an exam and getting a particular score to earn college credit. Those are going to come from, for AP specifically, that is through the College Board. So you would need to request that those AP scores be sent directly to the institution so we can award credit based off if you earned the appropriate score in that subject area test.
And Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly important to know that you have to take the exam, so simply taking the class would not count for college credit. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a great clarification of that. Absolutely. You have to take the exam and earn that particular score on that exam in order to earn the credit.
Great. On the admissions questions, Ethan, in addition to credits, does admissions value if a student has work experience, especially if it's not always possible to be involved in school sports and clubs?
Absolutely. That can be showcased in either a writing sample or an essay. That can certainly be valuable on the admissions review process. So if you want to kind of explain that situation, it's certainly commendable. And we see many students that are in those positions that are supporting themselves, their families, and to that level. And we recognize that and want to be sure that we're providing resources and guidance with that.
Absolutely. Ethan, is there a website where students can go to fill out the Common Application?
Yes. So if you go to Google search the Common Application, that is also going to take you to the Common Apps webpage. And there you can create an account, and then you'll be able to submit your Common Application. And how the process really works on that end is you submit a kind of a core application questionnaire. And then you are able to select individual institutions that you want to apply to individually. What might happen for various institutions, if you make that selection, there may be some additional questions you need to complete that are institutional specific. But ultimately, once you've built that application, added the institutions you want to attend, you'll submit everything. You will have to pay the application fees for each individual institution you do select, so keeping that in mind. If you're selecting several, you will be paying several application fees, but that is all done in one place. And once you submit the Common App, then your information will be sent directly to the institutions of which you've selected.
All right, so that's a great way to get to one place and apply to more than one institution. So great. Ethan, I'll move on to the next question, which is related to timing. And student is wondering if there's a strategy or tips that you would recommend for applying for summer admissions as opposed to regular fall. This particular student sees usually a higher percentage of acceptance in summer session as opposed to fall. Any tips related to that?
Absolutely. In terms of submitting those applications, you certainly want to be submitting that early, just like you would if you were applying for a fall semester. Each institution is going to be different in how they review applicants for the summer. Some institutions may have a different reviewing criteria or potentially a lower academic threshold ever so slightly for the summer. Others may have specific pathway programs for students to start in the summer if they're not meeting a general or regular, for the lack of a better word, admissions threshold at an institution. With that, I highly encourage, if you are looking at the summer and you think that the summer is going to be a better option for you, or you may have a better opportunity for admission in the summer, work with your admissions counselor on that to pose those questions, because again, each institution is going to be different with that. At UWF, for example, we have the same review criteria for summer and fall. There's no difference with that reviewing criteria. But again, each institution might be a little bit different in how they handle that.
Yep, and like you said, Ethan, always good to do your research and give yourself plenty of time so you can connect with the institution and ask those questions. Ethan, the next set of questions are related to FAFSA or financial aid. You mentioned it earlier. There's a question about providing advice on when to apply for financial aid for summer or fall 2021.
Absolutely, and I missed that piece in my comments earlier, but for submitting the FAFSA is going to open on October the 15th of every year. And so students now for fall of 2020 can submit a FAFSA for that term. But for summer students, it is a great point of clarification that if you're enrolling in the summer, you're going to need to submit two different FAFSA applications. The summer, for example, if you're enrolling in summer of 2020, you're going to submit the 2019-2020 FAFSA because the summer is wrapped up into the aid year for 1920. It runs fall, spring, summer. Then for fall 2020, you would need to submit the 2020-2021 FAFSA application to be considered for aid for that year. So there would be two different FAFSAs you would need to complete if you are enrolling in the summer.
That's good to know. Absolutely. And Ethan, one more question related to FAFSA. Could there be a negative effect in any way by filling out the FAFSA?
No, absolutely not. That is going to ultimately just give you an idea of what your financial aid award package is going to be. If you have any extenuating circumstances or anything that you have concerns about submitting that, it's always a good idea connecting with your admissions counselor or a financial aid counselor or the financial aid office at that institution. They can provide some additional guidance if you do have very specific concerns with submitting the FAFSA.
Absolutely. Great. Ethan, I see there's another question that's actually under our services and applying for scholarships listed on My Career Shines. And so we'll certainly follow up with you, but I'll tell you quickly, if you're trying to narrow down your options with the filters provided, is probably the best option if you're starting from over 200 scholarships. Looking at those filters and narrowing down what applies to you the most would be a great way to start, but we will follow up with you via email with additional tips on searching for scholarships and using My Career Shine. So we will do that. I think that covers most of our questions, Ethan. And so we want to thank you for joining us. We know you're busy, especially in the fall, so thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us this evening. I want to invite our audience to join us next at 6 o'clock for a session on Complete Florida. For those of you that have some college and want to finish your degree, we will have a speaker talking about the options there in that particular program. And for those of you that join us today and you are sophomores or juniors in high school, we certainly look forward to seeing you next year for our annual Virtual College Week. So thank you so much.